Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Kendall and we're doing a series of talks for the City of Joondalup Libraries on some social media topics. Usually you might be seeing me face to face in a Joondalup library, but at the moment we're doing some events online. And today's topic is about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a social media platform that is not just for job hunting. It's sometimes the kind of platform when I mention it to people, they kind of groan because they think, oh, LinkedIn's boring. But it really isn't boring, and it has changed a lot since it began. So today we're going to talk about a few things to cover LinkedIn, and hopefully you might see that it's not boring at all, and you might even want to try it out a bit more. So we'll start by discussing what LinkedIn actually is, why you might want to use LinkedIn, how to fill out your LinkedIn profile effectively, how you might make connections with other people on LinkedIn, because that's, of course, the social part of social media, how you might write posts or articles or share other things on LinkedIn, and also using LinkedIn groups, which are also sometimes neglected. So I promise by the end of this, I hope you'll be convinced to give LinkedIn a go for lots of different reasons, not just for job hunting. So, what is it? LinkedIn has actually been around since 2003. I mean, that's getting up to a couple of decades. It's kind of amazing. It began certainly largely as an online CV or resume place and a job board. And these parts still exist and are still a really important and useful reason to use LinkedIn. But back in those early days, it was really just a way of having a kind of a digital resume or a digital CV that you could share with people and that you could connect with people who might want to employ you. But these days it's evolved. It is definitely not just about job hunting. And now it's a really kind of fully fledged social media platform with a professional kind of work focus. So it's in some ways really similar to a platform like Facebook, but with the work focus. So on LinkedIn, you can connect with people you know or people you want to know, and you can send messages to each other. You can also read articles or other posts from the people you're connected to or from their connections and their networks. And basically, it is like Facebook. This is what I always tell people. It's like Facebook, but without funny cat videos. So it's, often actually a more interesting place than Facebook because there's not so much fluff on there on LinkedIn, and lots of really, really interesting things if you're connected to the right people. So why might you use LinkedIn? As I said, it still is a place for job hunting. That's one of its many features these days. So if you are looking for work, LinkedIn is a really good way to do it. And having an up-to-date profile on LinkedIn often means that you'll be contacted by people who are maybe headhunting or looking for someone like you. You can also find people for other purposes there. So perhaps you need to find a speaker or an expert of some kind. LinkedIn is a really good place to search for people for whatever needs you have. It's also a great place to connect with lots of like-minded people who share your interests or share your professional background. Also a great place to be finding articles and posts of interest that, especially if you have, quite specialized areas of interest, then following and connecting with people who share those interests is a really good way to make sure that you're across, the latest research or, what people are talking about in those areas today. And I guess that brings me to that last point there. LinkedIn is a great way to keep up to date. So I find it a great place to keep up to date with my professional interests and making sure that, I know what the kind of main thought leaders, I suppose, are talking about and thinking about. So if you are going to start start using LinkedIn, you need to make sure that you have a good LinkedIn profile so that people want to connect with you or can tell, what you're all about. So the important things for a good LinkedIn profile, first of all, the visual parts are pretty important. You want to have a good profile photo. That's the bit in the circle on that example there. And you want to have a good background cover photo. You can see mine behind my face is actually 3 pictures joined. I used Canva to join them. If you've not used Canva before, have a look. But it can be just one picture. But, as you can see, it's a long landscape picture. And so that background cover photo should reflect something about you so that people can kind of get to know what you are just by that quick visual look. Also, make sure that your profile photo is a good one and not, cropped out from being at a party or something like that. Once you've done that, you also need to complete the main sections of your profile, which are about, so the top part, experience, which is kind of the job experience, resume part of it, and education and other sections like that. So your profile has similar topics to a traditional resume, but you might fill it out in a different way. You might use the first person rather than the third person. I typically do, but not everybody does. Most people, I think, would talk about themselves in the first person, though, on LinkedIn. And you can put some, examples of the kinds of work you've done. You can even upload, presentations or videos or images or PDFs so that you can kind of demonstrate the work you've done. If you go further down a LinkedIn profile, there's the skills and endorsement sections. They're not so used these days, but you might see them come up and they might come back in the future. Who knows? Recommendations are still there too, and recommendations are really important. They're like references or testimonials. So the big part of the power of LinkedIn is making connections. So how do you make those connections on LinkedIn? There's a few ways to find people, and typically it's easier to connect with them if they're already connected to someone you know, or if you know them personally and perhaps have an email address. So you can, for a start, just search for people you know by name. So like that example in my screenshot there, I searched for Jane Smith, and you can see that LinkedIn has found some Jane Smiths who are second degree connections of mine. That means that we have a connection in common already. So LinkedIn assumes that this is more likely to be the Jane Smith that I'm looking for. And obviously, if I picked a less common name, it would be easier to find them. You can also search by keywords. So say you're looking for an expert, like a social media manager or something, or a topic of interest. You might search for wildlife conservation and find people who work in that area. You can also go and look through the list of the second degree or second and third degree connections of the people you know. So you can go to someone's profile and go and see their connections. So that's also a good way to find people that might be relevant to what you're looking for. And always make sure to check with the people who have asked to connect with you. Have a look at the people who've asked to connect with you. Connect if you know them. Just be aware that some people will be kind of trying to connect in a spammy way. So check in their profile and see, do they look like someone who's like-minded and interesting for me to connect with, or are they just trying to sell me something? And if they're just trying to sell you something, just click ignore. So on LinkedIn, you can write a post very similarly to the way you do on Facebook. So you can see there, this screenshot's from the mobile version. It looks really similar on desktop though. You can add a photo or a video. You can see there from those icons. You can paste a link in from a newspaper article or a blog post or whatever that you've read online, and LinkedIn will populate it with a nice picture from that post. And you can add your own comments about it. So very similar to how you would post on something like Facebook. Now, as well as posting something of interest that way, you can actually also write an article, which is what LinkedIn calls it. It's kind of like LinkedIn's blogging platform. So if you have something more substantial to say, multiple paragraphs rather than just a relatively short post, then you might want to write an article. When you're on the desktop version and you go to post, there's a option there where it says write an article, and you can click there and go and do it. Now, the other interesting part of LinkedIn that's sometimes neglected is that LinkedIn includes groups. So you might remember that there are Facebook groups as well, and LinkedIn groups work in a similar kind of fashion, and you can be invited to join them, invite others, and you can request to join a group. So there are groups for all kinds of topics. Probably any topic you imagine, there is a LinkedIn group for it, or multiple LinkedIn groups for it. So you can search for groups in the main search bar on LinkedIn, but you can also, when you do that, you can click on group, so it will just search for groups. So for example, if you're looking for perhaps Perth networking, then type Perth networking and then click on the groups part, and it will come up with a list of groups that are connected to that topic. So that way you'll see, how many members are in the group, and you can request to join. Usually you need to request to join. And then, once someone sees that request and you're admitted to the group, you can see more about what happens in the group. Some groups are really active and useful, some aren't. Sometimes it's a bit hit and miss. It's a bit hard to tell in advance sometimes, but once you're in there, you can have a look around. If you don't like it, you can leave. Of course, you can always leave a group, but a lot of them you'll find really useful, really interesting, and not necessarily used by everyone who uses LinkedIn. I think it's a feature that we can probably make more of. So that is my summary of how you could make the most of LinkedIn, making sure you have a great profile and that you're connected to interesting people, and perhaps making interesting posts yourself, and you of course can interact with those posts from other people as well. And if you do that, I think you can have a really interesting experience on LinkedIn, find out lots of useful information, and also, make some great connections and, friendships and professional relationships as well. So that's my summary. As I say on the notes there, LinkedIn is fascinating these days. Don't think, LinkedIn's boring. It's definitely not boring anymore. Best part about it is connecting with like-minded people. If you're connecting with someone who you don't know, you might want to put a note with the connection as you request to connect so that they know why you're asking. Be active on LinkedIn, so post your own things, read things, learn and react. And above all, have fun, because LinkedIn these days is much more than job hunting and is a lot of fun. Thanks.